What were the best short stories of the 20th century? I think it's impossible for one person to create a definitive list, but I took a stab at it anyway. Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I want to talk about short stories. Short stories don't get a whole lot of love on BookTube, and I think they deserve more attention from readers. Last year, I went out on a project to find the best short stories of the 20th century. I will provide a link to my initial video in the description. And I picked out 20 short stories that I had read before and decided to reread them and rank them from worst to best. Now, the stories I picked out were mostly, or a lot of them, from my early university days in the 80s. So people can criticize that my stories may not be what you would normally think of 20th century short stories based on this time frame. A lot of this came from the 80s framework. A few that I picked out were from later in my life. But I just want to talk again about how much I really like reading short stories. And the final rankings are not what I thought they would be. When I started making this video project in 2024, I listed out what I thought would be my top 5 short stories. Oddly enough, only one of them made it to the top 5. Other short stories crept in that I thought were better. How curious. Maybe that's just age creeping in, that my younger brain from the 80s remembered these stories as being better than they were. Now, all the short stories on this list are pretty good, with one exception. And you'll find out what that exception is pretty soon. I'm going to rank them from least favorite to most favorite. There are many authors or short stories that other readers will think should have been included on this list. Raymond Carver comes to mind. He is highly recommended by my friend Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. But as I was going over my memory, no short story by Raymond Carver stood out, so he was excluded from this list. You can include many other authors. Edith Wharton is probably going to be one short story author that other people would include, but again, no short story of hers stands out in my memory, and that's why she was excluded. I'm going to go through this list rather quickly. It will not be an in-depth analysis or discussion of each short story. This is essentially my rankings and just my gut impression of it. At number 20, Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? By Joyce Carol Oates, originally published in 1967. This is a dark tale of a teenage girl growing up in the 60s. It is supposedly her best short story, but did not make a lasting impression upon me. 19. A&P by John Updike, originally published in 1961. When I read this as a freshman at university, I was intrigued. A young girl walks around a supermarket just in her bathing suit. How exciting to a 19-year-old male. The 15-year-old male who read this was rather blasé about the story. 18. Emergency by Dennis Johnson, originally published in 1992. This is one of the few short stories that were included after my college reading days, and it is essentially about drug addiction and usages. And I liked it, but nothing that would say this is a great classic of American short stories. Number 17, The Dead by James Joyce, originally published in 1914. It is probably the best short story from his collection, Dubliners, and many people think very highly of this short story. But upon rereading it, probably for the third time, I just found other short stories by other authors more impressive. Number 16, Defender of the Faith by Philip Roth, originally published in 1959. This is about a Jewish man training recruits in boot camp and how they take advantage of him. Number 15, The Sea of Lost Time by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. When I read this as a freshman at university, I was enraptured with this town by the sea, lost in time, with its crabs. But upon rereading it, I just was not as impressed and was not enraptured as that young man was. Number 14, To Build a Fire by Jack London, originally published in 1908. It is the classic story of survival. A man caught in the wilderness of the Yukon, struggling to stay alive, and how man cannot defeat nature. Number 13, The Rocking Horse Winner by D.H. Lawrence, originally published in 1926. It is a tragedy of a young boy who's trying to settle the financial difficulties of his mother. Number 12, The Man Who Was Almost a Man by Richard Wright, originally published in 1940. This is about a young boy's attraction to guns and what guns can really do to your life. I think it is a short story that should be anthologized more and taught to more high school students because what guns do, guns kill. Number 11, Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin, originally published in 1957. This is about heroin addiction and music and family, about how destructive drugs can be to the mind and soul and the power of music to redeem it. Read the final few paragraphs of this short story to discover just what music can do to soothe a soul. Number 10, The Hunger Artist by Franz Kafka, originally published in 1922. I am actually surprised that this story wound up so low on this list. This was one of my top 5 originally. And this is a story about what someone will do for art and how people may not appreciate art as much as they should. Number 9, Barn Burning by William Faulkner, originally published in 1939. I had a real tough time on this list deciding if I was going to read Barn Burning or A Rose for Emily. Those are the 2 Faulkner short stories that I think are his best. I chose Barn Burning for this project because I thought it was more traditional Faulkner. And it is. It was the start of the Hamlet and Snopes trilogies. And for that, it is excellent. But I don't think it is as good as A Rose for Emily. Number 8, The Guest by Albert Camus, originally published in 1957. This was another one that would have been in my top 5 previously. It is a philosophical story about what to do about your destiny or your fate. Do you have a choice in your life? Camus says yes, you have a choice, but some people decide not to choose. Number 7, The Elephant Vanishes by Haruki Murakami, originally published in 1991. This is another short story chosen post-university. It is a story about an elephant that disappears from a Japanese zoo and is an exploration about what people think about when they encounter the inexplicable, and there is no concrete resolution. Number 6, The Swimmer by John Cheever, originally published in 1964. It was one of my original top 5 favorites. I again read this as a freshman at university and was just captivated with the idea of the story and its final denouement that I never saw coming. Number 5, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, originally published in 1990. Again, this is a short story that I encountered originally after leaving university. I included it on this list because I wanted to include some more modern short stories and was struggling to find some. And I'm amazed that it finished in the top 5. I think this is the 3rd time I read this short story. The first 2 times were on audiobook, but reading this in print this 3rd time, I was really captivated with these stories of soldiers and what they decided to bring with them into war. Very powerful short story. Number 4, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, originally published in 1948. I first read this short story in high school, and I thought, wow, what a great short story. I'm fairly certain it was assigned in my university class of short stories, and I still liked it. But this time, reading it again, I was struck in a different way. I always thought that The Lottery would be just a fanciful story, that in real life, people would reject the lottery, reject a tradition that is detrimental to their own well-being. But I've come to learn that Americans, and maybe people all over the world, will accept traditions that are against their own well-being, that will be harmful to them. And they will like that tradition for whatever reason, because America and the rest of the world are heading into dark times, and we may see things arise like the lottery. Not exactly as Shirley Jackson wrote in her short story, but I think people are going to be willing to embrace something lottery-esque, and that is truly terrifying. Number 3, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place by Ernest Hemingway, originally published in 1933. I had a difficult time deciding which Hemingway short story I should read for this project. There was, of course, A Short Happy Life of Francis Maycomber, The Hills Like White Elephants, The Soldier's Home, maybe a few other short stories that I could have included, but I'm satisfied that I picked A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. The story of a drinking establishment towards the end of night when things should be shutting down and people just need a place to sit and drink and have their thoughts. That it's a very important to have this place to do that. And I appreciate this story very much. Number 2, A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, originally published in 1953. Wow. This story never ceases to amaze me. Again, this is a story that I first encountered in high school, then at university, and I've probably read it at least 2, maybe 3 other times before rereading it again for this project, and it never ceases to amaze me how Flannery O'Connor could get so deep into the mind of the misfit and the grandmother who sees him as her own child in a way. And I just have to say it. We've had an accident. That's a quote from the story that's just so humorous. Number 1, The Garden of Forking Paths by Jorge Luis Borges, originally published in 1941. Ever since that freshman university class, I think this has been my favorite literary short story of the modern era. The idea that all of our choices can be played out in alternate realities is something that my mind turns to again and again. And I think this is just one of those perfect short stories that everyone should be reading. That is my ranking from worst to best of some of the 20th century's best short stories. Readers or viewers of this video, I'm sure, will have a vastly different idea of what their best short stories of the 20th century were. And that's okay, because I have only read a fraction of the stories that are out there. Sure, the ones that I have picked are mostly classics that will be known to most universities or high school teachers, but there are many others out there from lesser known authors that might be equally as good. Also, for this project, I essentially discounted science fiction stories, I discounted horror stories, or mystery stories. Now, some of these short stories are sometimes included in those other genres, and that's okay, because a story can belong to multiple genres. And I've been wondering if I should try this project again. Should I go out looking for the best 20th century science fiction stories, the best horror stories of the 20th century, the best mystery stories of the 20th century? In my initial video, I thought about doing that. I don't have any plans right now to take up any one of those projects, but maybe I should, because reading a short story can be immensely satisfying. And if you have gotten to the end of this video, I will suggest that you create your own list of short stories that you think are the best. You don't have to stick with the 20th century as I did. You can mix it up, or you can choose to focus on the 19th century or the 21st century. Perhaps you do want to focus on a specific genre. That's okay too. And read them and rank them and let people know what you think the best short stories are of whatever century you decide. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.